You may have heard that the Alabama Supreme Court last week ruled that frozen embryos are now legally children. We're going to talk about it and what this designation of personhood means for reproductive freedom. My name is Brittany Page. This is the Page Perspective. Some brief housekeeping before we get to the topic at hand here. I recently interviewed a harm reduction expert, Dr. Sheila Vicaria. She's awesome, intelligent, funny, generous, just all around fantastic human being. She wrote an important book, The Harm Reduction Gap. We had a great conversation, and if you're at all interested in harm reduction, drug policy, drug education, anything related to the war on drugs, please check it out and share it with a friend. Be sure you're subscribed for updates on new videos and new interviews because more is coming and I'm excited. Now, what I am not excited about, gotta love that segue, is Alabama. Saying this ruling is alarming doesn't even begin to describe it. A frozen embryo, an embryo on ice, we're not even talking about an embryo in a womb, an embryo on ice is now considered a child in Alabama. This is another attack on reproductive freedom. It's an attack on the separation of church and state, and we're going to get to all that, but this has had an immediate chilling effect on IVF in the state. IVF is a type of assisted reproductive technology, the full name, in vitro fertilization, one of the most common fertility treatments. It's a lengthy and expensive process involving the combining of sperm and eggs in a lab to create embryos, where those embryos are put on ice and assessed for quality before choices are made about which to implant into a uterus. Sometimes more than one at a time are implanted. This decision now complicates what fertility clinics can do with unused embryos or how they might be held liable if an embryo is damaged, since that is now on par with killing a child in Alabama. At least one fertility clinic in Alabama has already announced that it is immediately suspending IVF treatments, and they released this statement, quote, "We are saddened that this will impact our patients' attempts to have a baby through IVF, but we must evaluate the potential that our patients and our physicians could be prosecuted criminally or face punitive damages for following the standard of care for IVF treatments," Hannah Eccles, a UAB spokesperson, said in a statement to NBC News. Does that sound familiar? If you thought the Republican Party was moderating its views on abortion after the crisis that has been created by their abortion bans, you were wrong. From OBGYNs fleeing states with abortion bans, fearing prosecution or lawsuits for providing healthcare, leaving maternal healthcare deserts in their absence, to women dying after being denied abortions, to women having to flee their state to obtain an abortion after being prevented from doing so, even when it would save her life. Conservatives took a look around and they said, you know what? Let's make this even worse. And I want to read now from Mark Joseph Stern's write-up in Slate. I turned to him for many court-related things, and this is a good summary of how this all came to be. Quote, "Friday's ruling involves an Alabama law called the Wrongful Death of a Minor Act, though its implications stretch far beyond this one statute. The act allows the parent of a deceased child to collect punitive damages against a party who causes, quote, the death of a minor child through negligence. Here, the plaintiffs, who already conceived several children through IVF, accused a fertility center of violating the act by failing to secure their unused embryos. They alleged that a patient accessed the embryos without authorization, dropping and killing them. The plaintiffs claimed that the fertility center is liable under the act because their embryos qualified as children. By a 7-2 vote, the Alabama Supreme Court agreed. The majority declared that the, quote, natural, ordinary, commonly understood meaning of the word child includes embryos, which the opinion dubbed extrauterine children. Incredibly, the majority said that this was true when the Wrongful Death of a Minor Act was passed in 1872. That's because, according to the majority, state lawmakers of the 1870s believed that unborn qualified as full legal persons no matter their physical location, that is, inside a biological uterus or a cryogenic nursery. Whew. What? Cryogenic nursery? 1870s? You know, in the 1870s when frozen embryos were all the rage. It's not like the New York Times reported on the first baby born of frozen embryo in 1984. One thing that we knew when Roe was overturned was that it wasn't just abortion rights at risk. Justice Clarence Thomas, of course, wrote that it was time to reconsider decisions that established rights to birth control, private sexual acts, and marriage for LGBTQ plus people. So we knew that things were going to get worse, and now they are. But you may be wondering, other than turning to the 1870s in order to change policy in the year 2024, what else is this decision based on? For that, we will turn to the concurring opinion written by Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice Tom Parker. Quote, in summary, the theologically based view of the sanctity of life adopted by the people of Alabama encompasses the following. 1, God made every person in his image. 2, each person, therefore, has a value that far exceeds the ability of human beings to calculate. And 3, human life cannot be wrongfully destroyed without incurring the wrath of a holy God, who views the destruction of his image as an affront to himself. Section 3606 recognizes that this is true of unborn human life, no less than it is of all other human life, that even before birth, all human beings bear the image of God, and their lives cannot be destroyed without effacing his glory. Oof. Imagine being a non-believer in the state of Alabama, or any person who's not a Christian or who does not believe in this particular view of Christianity. Quote, the theologically based view of the sanctity of life adopted by the people of Alabama. This is truly scary stuff, and it's impossible to square this waxing poetic about the sanctity of life when this same state, the state of Alabama, out of desperation to kill an incarcerated man facing the death penalty, turned to an experimental method earlier this year, which resulted in him suffocating to death after their first attempt at executing him failed. His name was Kenneth Smith. And the first time they tried to execute him, quote, in November 2022, the state strapped him for 4 hours to a gurney and punctured his arms and legs in a failed attempt to find a vein through which to kill him using lethal drugs. So they decided to try nitrogen gas this time, the first and only time this method has been used in the United States. So far, they're trying to plan and do this again. The conservative justices on the Supreme Court, they refused to save him. Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote a very moving dissent that I would recommend you read. You can also read the account from his spiritual advisor who witnessed his execution. He called it torture, and that certainly sounds right. After more than 20 minutes of watching someone violently shake and writhe on a gurney, I would say that too. But wait, how can that be? How is it that Alabama did this to Kenneth Smith? I thought, quote, all human beings bear the image of God, and their lives cannot be destroyed without effacing his glory. I guess not. So Media Matters recently dug up a clip of Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice Tom Parker, who you just heard there talking about the sanctity of life. He recently made an appearance with Johnny Enlow, a QAnon conspiracy theorist and self-proclaimed prophet, MAGA prophet. And as if we didn't already have enough red flags with this guy, let's take a closer look at Supreme Court Chief Justice Tom Parker's pal, Johnny Enlow. Quote, Enlow is a pro-Trump prophet and leading proponent of the Seven Mountain Mandate, a quasi-biblical blueprint for theocracy that asserts that Christians must impose fundamentalist values on American society by conquering the, quote, 7 mountains of cultural influence in U.S. life: government, education, media, religion, family, business, and entertainment. Not great? Understatement? He's all in. He believes world leaders are stealing the blood, that they are satanic pedophiles, the whole thing. So naturally, the Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice Tom Parker appeared on this guy's show, demonstrated familiarity with his QAnon prophecy and his work, and he said this.
Well, as you've emphasized in the past, we have abandoned those 7 mountains and they've been occupied by the opposite side. And so if you are called of the Lord to be on one of those mountains, I urge people to make sure that you and your spouse are in agreement on this, because you're going against resistance.
We've abandoned those 7 mountains and they've been occupied by the opposite side, he says. So we know, based on what Tom Parker wrote in his concurring opinion, what he said in his appearance with this conspiracy theorist, we know that Tom Parker believes that he is in a position to impose fundamentalist Christian values on American society through his job working on one of those 7 mountains, the government. So this is, again, Chief Justice sitting with someone who believes Democrats are satanic pedophiles who drink blood, and the Chief Justice is asked if he can share what he's doing behind the scenes with his cases to bring theocracy to the United States. Well, in so many words.
Are there any particular stands that you're making right now that are ones that you can, whether even if it's very general, that you can share? Just things that are, we know one of the stands will be constitutional aspect of it, and anything else that you're able to share with the audience. We understand there are so many things you can't share, things that are in process. And
yeah, well, we can't discuss a case that's not
can't discuss the case. That's obvious.
So he can't discuss the cases, but rest assured, everybody, there are cases, and Tom Parker is working overtime to ensure that he can impose his version of Christianity on the rest of us. And I think that we've all seen at least one case here with his ruling that frozen embryos are literal children. We've spent a lot of time talking about reproductive freedom since Roe was overturned, and that conversation has focused on abortion rights, and that is crucial. But this is another aspect of reproductive freedom. And we should be thinking about all of the people who have gone through such a difficult, laborious, and expensive process with IVF, hoping to get pregnant, hoping to expand their families, who are now wondering, is that even possible for them because they happen to live in the state of Alabama? Not to mention the other folks who use IVF, women who want to have kids without a partner, women who are older, LGBTQ plus couples. When we look at this list, it's no wonder that conservatives are attacking IVF. And listen, I'm not into scare tactics. We deal with facts on this show. We deal with reality on reality's terms. Nothing I've said here is hyperbolic. And if you're afraid, I think that's a justifiable response. This is scary. And it's time for everyone to pay attention, to get involved, to stay involved, because we can only stop this from getting worse and reverse course if we stick together and elect people who will ensure that things don't get worse and that we can get back to where we need to be. And we need to stay in this fight. What do you think? I'd love to know. You can call 657-464-7609 or send an email to idoubitit@dollemore.com. I want to thank my newest channel members who help support this work for as little as $1.99 a month. Thank you to Raven McQueen Live, Kimmy Thea Minor, Khalil Iskaris, DP Snake Eyes, and G Whitaker. Thank you very much for your support. If supporting here isn't your thing, you can always hop over to Patreon, patreon.com/IDoubtItPodcast, and support over there. But liking, sharing, subscribing, that is all a huge form of support too. So I appreciate however you choose to support the show. Thank you for being here. Take care, and I will see you next time.